Game day brings out the best in all of us. Leadership, teamwork, tradition, spirit. These are the things we love about college athletics. They're also the values that drive the associates at Regions Bank to bring you the products, advice, and financial guidance you need to move life forward. Because at Regions, every day is game day. Regions, official bank of the SEC. Regions Bank, member FDIC.
Hey, baseball fans, I'm Buster Olden, and in the first of our off-season podcasts, we dig into the percolating trade and free agent market. The Astros and Braves strike quickly. The Yankees, Dodgers, and Giants poised for big moves. And we talk with Cubs general manager Jed Hoyer.
Bring your own guts.
This is the best.
You hear me?
Of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Every single Friday is when we get Brent Musburger to call in. We can't wait as we welcome you back to Baton Rouge. But today, we saved the quarter.
That's it.
And the nickel, whatever.
It didn't have to fire up the truck. How are you, Paul?
It is so good to see you, Brent, and belated congratulations. Last Friday, when we normally talk to you, you were en route back from being awarded the Vin Scully Achievement Award at Fordham.
Yeah.
And then they honored you by making you do the first half by yourself.
Yeah, who knew I was going to have to work hard?
That had to be a great honor, though. You've had many.
It really was. You know, I actually worked with him.
Sure.
Some in the old days, some baseball games, and when I lived in Los Angeles and worked locally out there, I would always see him at Dodger Stadium. And a class individual, Paul, truly an icon. And I see he's going to get the Medal of Freedom. He's going to go to the White House. Much deserved. Wonderful man.
That was my memory correct, and I'm going back a long time. When you were in L.A., were you actually the anchor?
I was.
I
worked with. Do you remember Connie Chung?
Of course.
We anchored the 6 o'clock
That's
news
amazing.
Together. Okay, and when it first started, they would actually have me take a beat about midway through the 30 minutes, and then do the sports report for a couple of minutes, and then come. And that I said, you know. And I think they understood, too. It just doesn't seem right. Then they gave me a choice. You want to stay in hard news or you want to go? And I was really I'm a sports guy. I enjoy it. So.
How did you gravitate toward being a news anchor?
They asked me.
You just thought it was?
Yeah, they came to me and said, would you go work this? And I said, well, yeah, okay. So it was a great experience. Connie remains she's married to Maury Povich.
Sure.
Okay. They've got another place up in Montana up around Kalispell where they spend part of the time in the summer. So, listen, it was a good experience for me, okay? But there's a nicer stories in sports than in hard news when you cover it every day.
No, Connie Chung was she was the anchor of the CBS Evening News. That went over very well with some people.
No, I know that.
But she was a great
chemistry did not. Our chemistry was really good. Okay, we really got along.
Better than her and Dan.
I had to depend on her. Whereas I think when she wound up in the Evening News, the other dude said, "You depend on me," and that wasn't how I looked at it at all.
The other dude, Dan Rather. We're taking some old timers way back, but I vaguely remember that because I followed you pretty closely back then when you were in Chicago,
right.
and obviously since then. Let's talk. So you're doing the game last week. I mean, you could. I mean, Brent, you could broadcast traffic if you wanted to, but what was that like? I'm sure you've done that before, but probably not lately.
It was different. So I just told myself I'm going to stay as far away from the X's and O's as I can. I'm going to stay with the Jimmies and the Joes. I'm going to be as basic as I can. And when I get to a instant replay on a ruling, I'm going to ask the fans to make up their own mind as they watch the replay, as I'm watching it. You know, John Madden taught all of us a great lesson, and some people didn't get it. Don't start talking right away. Sometimes the camera sees more than the naked eye at all times, okay? John was a master at watching the replays and then making up his mind. Don't make up your mind previously. So I tried to use a little of the Madden approach with the...
I'm curious because, I mean, every broadcaster has a different view, and particularly those who started farther back.
Right.
A lot of them came from radio. Today it's a totally different animal. But when you're doing a game, what is your mindset? What are you trying to communicate, disseminate to the audience?
Well, I think first of all, it's about people, okay? And you try to tell their stories as the game unfolds, okay? Secondly, one of the big differences, because I've done so much with the NFL, the big difference between the college and NFL is the enthusiasm and the excitement that you get surrounding our particular game.
Right.
I mean, the cheerleaders, the bands, the crowds, the passion. And I tell everybody, now listen, when they get to the playoffs, there's nothing like a professional sport, whether it's football, whether we went through the World Series, or whether it's the NBA. Those guys perform at a completely different level, and you appreciate it. But during the regular season, it's difficult for them to show up week in and week out because their games are so much more physical than what we have at the collegiate level. And I try to guide them along. I give a little controversy occasionally if there's something out there, stir the pot a little bit. Give the Twitterati something to talk about. I mean, there's nothing nothing wrong with that, Paul. As a matter of fact, you do it yourself very well.
Occasionally, but I don't. I'm doing it.
How you doing with those Michigan people now? Are we okay? Are we all right?
Well, yeah. I have learned though. I used to take more pleasure in other people's misfortunes, but Michigan lost the other night. I said, let it go.
Right.
They're
Good
going
for you. Good for you.
It took me a while.
Yeah. But you weren't like Herbstreit. Herbstreit knocked him completely out of top four. The old Buckeye in him really came out, and the committee said, well, we'll let them play an elimination game, and one of them will fall by the wayside. That's basically what they're up to with the Ohio State, Michigan. I mean, there's a lot of politics. You and I know that with the committee choosing the four, all things being equal, they would prefer 4 different conferences to be represented. And I get that. I think I would feel the same way. Let's bring a diversity to the country into the 4-team playoff.
But you did the BCS championship for so many years,
right.
And as screwy as that system was, most of the time, there was one exception that people didn't like, although it was the obvious game.
Right.
And that was the Alabama-LSU game.
Yeah, there's no question. That brought us the 14 playoff as much as any game because the other parts of the country didn't feel that they were included in the process, and we were giving the SEC untold advantage. You and I both know that the reason why the SEC got that is that they were by far the superior conference that year.
No, and I'm curious about something else because I'm involved in all this every day, starting from Sunday morning until the end of the week. This obsession we have now over the playoff. Do you feel like it's taking something away from the games? I mean, a game like tomorrow, you're preparing for it. People are invested in it. But it's almost like we forget there are actual games going on.
Exactly. Paul, it's postseason does that. I mean, the pros will tell you right now, how many friends do we have who say, I'm paying attention to the NBA until playoffs start, okay? So I understand why they went to the 4-team, but I think they have to be careful because let's just take our game here. Let's take the LSU game, okay? They've got Florida coming in. If the Gators win, they're going to Atlanta as the SEC East champions, okay? That's very big to them to do that. Now, if LSU wins, they're one victory away, assuming that Alabama can handle Auburn at home, assuming that happens. Then LSU's one victory away over Texas A&M for going to the Sugar Bowl, which is big for them. Yeah. I mean, we don't want to overlook the other things that are involved in this. Let's say that Washington State or even Washington got to the Rose Bowl. It's a great accomplishment for them. It should, just because they don't get to the Final Four should not be completely overlooked.
Yeah, I didn't appreciate that. You did the game. I was out there. It was Michigan State. Was it Michigan State and Stanford in 13?
Yeah.
I had never been to the Rose Bowl, and I'm at that game, and I believe Michigan State won.
They did.
And I was watching the Big Ten fans celebrate. I'm like, what are they celebrating? The big game's next week. But I finally got what it meant.
Exactly. It means a lot to the Midwesterners. And down here in the SEC, winning the Sugar Bowl. Now, let's take Coach Orgeron. He might become the permanent head coach here at LSU if he could guide this team into the Sugar Bowl. Regardless of what happens in that particular game, they would, I think, feel obligated to give him a contract as a head coach.
It meant so much to Ole Miss fans last year.
No question.
And I think when Alabama goes, it is a consolation prize, but that's the outlier.
Exactly. If you're expected to go into the Final Four, as Alabama is now almost every year, let's face it. It's like automatic. It was interesting talking to some of the LSU players today about their defense, and yet we should not overlook the fact that game was scoreless through 3 quarters. Yeah. LSU played their hearts out in that game and just couldn't get the ball into the end zone against that terrific defense. But they played a great football game.
You've been down here quite a bit, and you spent time with with Coach O, and
Right.
we're 2 games away from not only the Sugar Bowl, but of a potentially big controversy. You keep hearing Jimbo Fisher's name mentioned,
Right.
and I'm trying to imagine them introducing Jimbo Fisher on the Monday after Thanksgiving weekend, if LSU's going to the Sugar Bowl and hasn't lost a game.
I would say they've got a hold on that. Now, we know that the athletic administration here, especially the AD, great respect for Jimbo Fisher. I can understand that. When Nick Saban won a championship with the Tigers, Jimbo was the offensive coordinator.
Sure.
So it's certainly understandable. He's a great offensive coach, doing a great job. You know, I'm not sure, looking at it from Jimbo's point of view, Paul, I'm not sure that I would leave Florida State to come and jump into the SEC West. That's just kind of my mindset. On the other hand, money talks, and you know what walks, okay? So they might be able to turn him around. But
Looking like the brother of an agent.
Yes, yes. But on the other hand, I firmly believe that if Coach O continues to win, they should give him a permanent contract. He speaks to the culture here in Louisiana. It's the only place I've said where he can come and coach and doesn't need an interpreter. They love him. They wrap their arms around him. I love being around Coach O. I've pulled for him. I was around him when he was the interim coach at USC. I actually thought my friend Pat Hayden should have hired him out there between you and me. I thought he did a terrific job. I did a game in which he beat Andrew Luck in Stanford.
Remember
that. And it was a great performance. Yeah.
No, I was there that morning. I apologize.
Right.
I had to leave,
Right.
but we were doing game day out there, and there was so much enthusiasm
No
for him that
question.
night,
There's no question.
that morning, and that was a major accomplishment.
Yeah, and there has been around here too. As I go around and talk to the folks, they really like Coach O. They're pulling for him in this particular, and that has nothing against Jimbo Fisher. I'm not, he's
Final thought: you've seen a lot of interesting moments, but Saturday night in Kyle Field, watching the Shea Patterson show had to be fun.
Yeah, I'd heard, and here at LSU, they tried hard to recruit him. Okay, Louisiana youngster, and they got him up at Ole Miss. I was down on the field because I wanted to see Hugh Freeze, but I kind of stopped for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I watched him warm up. Okay, and I said, "Wow, I don't know if this translates to a game, but he's got that quick release from ear gone, ball's gone." He was practicing rolling left, which is very hard. He could get his balance. And now he's thrown against air, but he was still impressive. But here was the most impressive thing. In the game, he got better each quarter. He started to understand what the Aggies were trying to do to him. And then down 21-6, and he pulls off that great comeback in the fourth quarter. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself because it's just one game. But he looked to me like the real deal. Okay, I'm gonna tell you this. He looks to me like he's really going to be a good quarterback. He's eerily similar physique-wise in the way he plays to Johnny Manziel. Now, let's hope when the clock strikes midnight, he forgets all that Johnny Manziel things. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So, but, Paul, I was impressed.
We're always impressed with you.
Oh, thank
you
Paul.
never
Hey,
cease to. I mean, this.
Hey,
it is so much fun to see you and to be part of it.
Your fans, I've told you this. I'm driving down the road in Montana, man. I'm smiling, listening to this thing. You're going to get the Auburn collars next week, and then here comes Roll Tide, Paul. You're going to get them. You can't beat your collars. I learn a lot from them.
Thank you, Brent.
You got it, my friend.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
A lot of activity in this community. It wasn't supposed to be that big of a college football weekend. South Alabama was the original opponent.
I was looking forward to that one.
That was
how things
may have been an easier game. But as everyone knows, October 8th became tomorrow.
It's well done.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Tim and Marcus here.
Well done.
Championship Drive brought to you by Dr. Pepper, Marcus Spears, Tim Tebow. Now your baseball season, at least this year's baseball season, or at least this fall's baseball season ended
Finished up yesterday, and now I get to hang out with you guys for the rest of the year.
It never stopped.
Finish this year
That's
strong,
like a day off, huh?
Hey, by the way, you just got tapered up a little bit. It's looking sharp.
My man Smash. Rich.
Yeah, got
Shout
you
out
right.
to Rich. Yep.
Okay.
What happened?
Best barber in the land.
Just down here?
Yeah.
Rich?
Could
It's
you let
Rich?
me in?
Rich.
Later?
Rich?
He can get you in.
Get
You
him
take
taped
care
up,
of
get
it.
him taped up real quick.
Yeah, I don't like the way you said he'll take care of you.
Add some hair up there. That's what he'll do.
Good to see you guys. Well, let's get right to it. We've been down here with you a number of times. This is a place with great memories for you in this game.
Good and bad, but very passionate memories. And I remember coming down here my sophomore year, and LSU, I think, was #1 in the country when we played them, and that great defense, and we just had a battle.
We just
back
watched
and
the
forth.
jump pass on.
Oh, that was my freshman year. I remember I did that in practice, and we put the play in, and I went and jumped up in practice, and Coach Meyer was like, "What were you doing?" I was like, "I don't know. I just did it naturally." And he was like, "All right,
we'll put that in."
So before we went out there, there's
you
only
done it before?
No, we put it that week in practice, and they had a play in Utah where they put a big fullback in, and he just took a step up and then tossed it back, and it was a touchdown. But it wasn't a jump pass or anything. He didn't run all the way up to the line of scrimmage. So I did that in practice, and it worked against our defense, which was a really good defense.
Coaches get too much credit. They get too much credit.
Now, the second game, that was your junior year. Was that the famous concussion game that you were coming?
Senior year.
Oh, senior year.
Senior year here. Yeah, coming off of a concussion, got put to sleep versus Kentucky.
Yeah. They remind us every year.
Yeah, they do remind us every year. Yeah, I had to wake up. Probably all the smell and salts
the Tebow
down there.
highlights. Let's take a look at some Marcus
now this
Spears
is the long
highlights.
list.
What?
It wasn't easy to find these, by the way.
Old stuff.
Where is he?
Get up.
Oh, he knocked the ball down.
Get up. Paul, don't make it sound small like that.
Man,
that was
you were
third
skinny
down.
back then, Mark.
That was third down.
24th, bro.
Wasn't a great year. Wasn't a great year, man.
24th. Y'all were almost out of the rankings.
We beat y'all, though.
Whoa! That's your old basketball.
Yes.
Your old
You're
basketball
real pumped about that real pumped about that knockdown.
Hey, it's third down. That's like sealing the game almost.
Almost.
Yeah. We got the W. That's a big
sealing the game. You were still down by 4.
What? We won that, cuz.
So you came from behind.
If I wouldn't have tipped that ball, you get the first down.
Yeah.
You extend
Run the clock out.
Exactly. We don't have time.
I get it. Good. Well done, baby. Well done.
You know football.
I feel you.
I had a lot of success against Florida quarterbacks.
Okay, let's get
the Saturday stars.
Let's get to present day, if you don't mind.
Sure.
2016.
It's 2016. This game tomorrow. Gators have not. Nobody feels good about the Gators coming in.
Well, I think the number one reason people don't feel good is injuries, and number two is they're not scoring touchdowns. And you look at this team, and they have the Florida team, if healthy, there's a lot of good playmakers on this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But they're just healthy. And the two guys that I think are the most valuable inside linebackers, Anzalone, he runs sideline to sideline and make plays. And Jared Davis runs sideline to sideline and make plays. And when you're missing both those guys, it's tough to have a defense that's able to hang with Leonard Fournette and Darius Geis and all of the weapons that LSU has.
Look, it just doesn't match up for them well. I mean, offensively, they're not generating enough, and they're playing against a team that has only given up 10 touchdowns the whole year.
Amazing.
And then on defense, they would be well equipped if everybody was healthy. But now you have to deal with the run game with Leonard Fournette and Darius Geis. And now even Edling, now things are opening up for him to throw the ball because they're having success running. It just doesn't set up well. Now, with that being said, this is still Florida.
Yeah.
Like, let's not forget. And we've seen.
And let's remember this series is a match. It's a rivalry where a lot of upsets happen.
It is.
A lot of upsets.
So, the one thing that because being here yesterday and then I was around the facility, the one thing I know for sure is that on LSU's side, they not looking at the injuries and saying, well, we should win this one handily. It's going to be a tough game, man. I mean, it just is what it is.
This would sound crazy at most places, Marcus, but this is a noon game. This is not a culture that's used to that.
Absolutely, and it matters. I mean, when you look at, people talk about Saturday night in Death Valley. You hear it everywhere you go. It's really a thing, though. I mean, everybody's getting primed up all day. The energy is different. What you feel from the crowd, and just the whole atmosphere. And when you play at noon, most people are just starting at that time of the day. I mean, after last night, they just starting to get going again. Especially here. They just starting to get going again. So the feel when you run out into the stadium is totally different. That's why we love them. We try to schedule everyone at night.
And what I think your average fan doesn't understand about football and what we're talking about, why it's different at night, is every time you take the field, it's not like a video game where your ranking's a 92 and you always play like a 92.
Right.
I mean, it's a scale of emotion and rhythm and confidence and, working together in a game plan, all working. And that's why great coaches are able to pull the best out of their players. And it's really trying to follow this path to get the best out of your players, because you can't show up every day and be the same player every day. You try to be as consistent as possible, but it's hard because you go through peaks and valleys, and that's why what Saban has done in Alabama is so impressive, because he gets them to compete at such a high level every single week. But he also does that because he has so many backups that are good and great coaches and great game plans. But that's what's going to be interesting tomorrow, is to see what type of LSU team do we get, because we have seen really good, we have seen average, and we have seen poor from different members and different groups of this LSU team. Which team shows up? If their really good team shows up, I don't think they lose.
The one thing about it is this, and I continue to say, like last week when I said the Arkansas game was a litmus test for Ed Orgeron. Now, it's going to matter how prepared this team is this week. Did they buy into the hype? Did they look at all of the injuries, and were they prepared to play LSU football as opposed to everything outside influencing how they thinking about it? The rivalry, the DBU stuff. Florida sitting over here with injuries. We know they struggle scoring touchdowns. If any of that matters to the team, then that's not the way to go into a football game. And then, too, going back to the schedule, when you play a noon game, you wake up at 6 a.m. and you have breakfast, and then you maybe get back to your room and you go do a walkthrough and try to have something else.
It helped crazy, but Florida played a noon game last week in Gainesville, so they've done this in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it matters. Absolutely. I hated them. I hated early games. When I was in Dallas, I hated them. When I was here, I hated them, because you get so used to a routine. Right. Because most of your games are 7, most of your games late evening. But when you step up to those early games, man, and you're one, my big thing preparing for a game was I always wanted to wake up early and then be able to get another 2.5 hours of sleep before we had to get on the bus. When you up at 6, you up until the game, and you already hyped, your nerves going, you're ready to play as soon as you get up, and you just don't have that time to kind of settle down before the real thing starts.
He keeps his routine. He still gets another 2.5 hours before SEC Nation starts in the morning.
I get up early, go back to sleep.
You more of an early guy?
I tried to, when we found out what time the game was, I would try to set my clock according to whenever that game was going to be starting on Monday. And I would prepare for that starting on Monday. If it was an early game, then I'll wake up the same time every day through the entire week. If it was a late game, I would try to sleep in, and so I would balance it week to week.
I did not.
But I feel like it really helped me, though.
I burned the candle from both ends.
Shocking.
That's what I did.
I get up the same time every day.
4?
What time for real?
Seriously.
I get up pretty early.
What time do you wake up, Paul?
Today about 5.
Are you still going for your runs?
It depends. I try to run in the morning.
How far are you running these days?
You beat the sun every morning.
Not every morning, but
how far are you running these days, Paul?
A couple miles.
Couple miles?
I'm not a marathon man.
I think people need to know that you at least are a runner.
He's getting it out there, He's
I'm not a great runner, but I'm a runner.
Maybe you need to take a couple of days off and just replace it with eating.
Yes.
This is a good place to do it.
It's a good place.
Guys, thank you very much. The Dr. Pepper, the championship trophy brought to you by Dr. Pepper, Marcus Spears, and Tim Tebow in the house. What a great half hour that was with Brent, Marcus, and Tim.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You're not worth a flail.
Welcome to Belk, official retail department store of the SEC. With more than 300 department stores in the Southeast, we get your fashion. We know it's more than a game, it's a way of life, and part of the modern Southern lifestyle we deliver every day. At Belk, you'll find new looks from the best brands like Michael Kors, Fry, Free People, Under Armour, and more. All at great prices you'll love, the fashion you desire, the value you deserve. That's modern Southern style. Experience it today in store or at belk.com.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You're not worth a flail.
right outside of Tiger Stadium. We're at noon tomorrow local time. Place will be jumping. May not quite to the level of a few weeks ago when Alabama came in here on a Saturday night, but the game, very, very important. One of many games that will be topic A through Z tomorrow morning on SportsCenter Weekend, hosted by Sarah Walsh and our good friend Matt Berry, who joins us. Good afternoon, Matt. Here we go. We're at week 12 of the season. Seems like just yesterday you were going through Dallas, Austin, and Orlando on the opening weekend of the season.
Yeah, Paul, how about that? You start the season with the trifecta week 1, and now we're sitting here the week before Thanksgiving. And thankfully that Florida LSU game got rescheduled this week. At least someone in the SEC is playing a football game. My goodness.
Wow, the venom coming out early in the conversation. By the way, Matt, it will be a topic all day long tomorrow. You know that. Many will call it Cupcake Saturday, and I'm with you on that. I don't like it. I think it's that weekend of the year that I look forward to the least, right at the time that we should be right into the intensity, pageantry, and excitement of this great game.
Yeah, and that's what gets me, Paul, is we talk about this all the time, and there's proof to the argument that the SEC has long been considered the biggest, baddest conference in college football. But I don't get what this weekend does for anybody other than cutting the school the paycheck to come get their butts kicked on a Saturday afternoon in November. What exactly are we getting accomplished? If Auburn wants a bye week before the Iron Bowl, take a bye week. If Alabama, you find a way to get these games and schedule better out of conference, because if you just look at it where we are, and to your point, we should be reaching fever pitch of excitement for the end of this college football season, and we had to use a game that got rescheduled because of a hurricane to get us excited for the SEC tomorrow. So I'm with you. When you get to the point where we should be talking about conference championships and playoff positioning, get rid of this weekend, and if you're going to do it at the beginning of the year when people are trying to figure things out anyway.
Yeah, Matt, not to answer my own question, but the SEC regular season for most schools used to end last weekend. I'm trying to remember, in the 90s and maybe even a little bit later, the Alabama-Auburn game was on last weekend. This weekend, it was on this weekend. Let me apologize. It was on this weekend, and then there would be a break sometimes, Thanksgiving weekend, to rest up for the SEC, and then they put in a new rule disallowing that. So you ended up with this forced weekend, and without this game here in Baton Rouge, Matt, you'd have Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Tennessee as the only SEC conference games of the weekend.
Yeah, and look.
By the way, Arkansas, Mississippi State too. I apologize.
Yeah, and that one's being played. But if you look away from the Southeastern Conference for the weekend, and you look what's going on in the Big 12 with Oklahoma, West Virginia. You have to be a real football nerd like me to be excited for Washington State, Colorado, of which I am. I want to see what both of these teams have. And so you kind of have to pick and choose around the country to see which conferences have some meaningful games. And now with what we're going to be talking about in the Big Ten, based on what we saw last week, every game in that league down the stretch is going to be huge, partly because of the Louisville upset and what the Big Ten's got facing them with a team like Ohio State.
Yeah, let me get your reaction to that. I mean, on so many levels. Number one, what did it mean to the rankings next week without anything else going on, and what did it mean to Lamar Jackson's seemingly lock of the Heisman Trophy?
I'll start with Lamar Jackson first. I was texting with some people last night during the game about the Heisman Trophy. I firmly believe it brought players like perhaps a J.T. Barrett back into the conversation. I think if Jabril Peppers shows out tomorrow and then has a big game against Ohio State, he could find his way prominently into that conversation. And maybe a guy like Donnell Pumphrey, who's working his way up the rushing list, maybe he gets his name considered. So I still think we sit here today with Lamar Jackson, the favorite. I believe that door has been open for other players to firmly walk in, especially if they close out the deal. But in terms of the playoff, I've said this about Louisville for the last month. People were enamored by three things with Louisville. They were enamored by the beatdown of Florida State, the close loss to Clemson that was the game of the year, and the highlights of Lamar Jackson on SportsCenter. Those three ingredients gave people the sense that Louisville was one of the top 4 teams in the country. When in reality, if you look at their body of work and the fact that they were having a hard time beating teams like Virginia, Duke, Wake Forest took from the fourth quarter, this was a team that had deficiencies. I believe because of last night, you're going to have a mess in the Big Ten, especially if Ohio State takes out Michigan next week. That and the Big 12 has worked their way back into the conversation, because I'm one of the rare people out there that believes the committee would be very seduced by a 10-2 Oklahoma team if they were to go on the road tomorrow and beat Virginia, or West Virginia rather, then win Bedlam against Oklahoma State, and with a little bit of momentum, especially if Washington State were to beat Washington in the Apple Cup.
So, do you think, I know you answered that in different ways, Matt, but do you think Washington right now is best positioned, assuming they win out?
Because of what's left on their schedule, yes, because you're looking at a team who has to beat Washington State in the Apple Cup, which is going to be a big game, but then who they might have to play in the Pac-12 South. They could get another look at USC, or if Colorado wins and beats Utah, they could get a look at a top 10 Colorado team. So I think there's enough left. There's enough meat on Washington's resume bone to work their way back into the conversation at 4.
Okay, so let's look at tomorrow's slate. You've already alluded. I mean, would you agree? I'm trying to get you to rank in order the games you have to watch. Would you start with Oklahoma, West Virginia? Would that be the must game of the day?
Well, honestly, I'd start. I do want to see, if you're doing it in chronological order, I think LSU Florida is going to be a really, really good watch, because I think there's still some momentum for Coach O out there in Baton Rouge. But, yeah, in terms of what games mean something, big picture, Oklahoma, West Virginia, without question, is the number one game, because I just don't know if enough people are paying attention to what West Virginia is able to do. So I'd put that one. And then I'm telling you, Paul, no one knows about Colorado. No one knows about Luke Falk at Washington State. If you're a football fan, watch that game tomorrow, because it's going to be good.
Great stuff. Matt, we'll talk to you early in the morning. As always, thanks for your time on Friday afternoon. We'll really appreciate it.
All right, bud. Enjoy it down there.
You got it. Matt Berry from SportsCenter Weekend begins tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. down the Eastern Time Zone, 6 a.m. right here in Baton Rouge, and we'll be kicking the show off with Matt and Sarah tomorrow morning.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Matt Stinchcomb covering tomorrow night's Chattanooga, Alabama game live from Tuscaloosa. Matt, always great to catch up. Really interested in the mood there, since I read earlier today that Nick Saban did not like being questioned about him putting former players at practice. What's the deal?
It didn't really come up in our meetings. It didn't seem more perturbed than usual. I think
he mentioned it on his radio. He mentioned it on his radio show last night.
Yeah, I heard about it, and there was some conversation in and around the complex over there today. But Coach Saban clearly had settled down from whatever elevated state he reached before. Look, when you look at the landscape and the way the rules are written, why not take advantage of it? And what program would have more players that could come back and participate at a high level than Alabama? The number of guys that they're able to graduate and or send to the pro ranks, if they're not currently on a football team at the professional level, then why not take advantage of the opportunity to not only allow them to kind of keep their edge, but also prepare your team week in and week out? I think that a lot of these coaches that are taking exception to it probably wish that they had thought of it before.
Matt, I'm curious because we all know the gauntlet that Alabama has gone through. This is certainly the easiest game since September, but it's still a game that you have to play, and you certainly don't want to let up, and you don't want to get anyone injured. What's it like talking to staff, talking to personnel in this environment right now, considering what is going on around Alabama and around college football?
Well, you mentioned, keeping an edge and maybe being able to play well with, you're facing an opponent that is coming from a different division, obviously the football championship subdivision for UTC, and a really good football team in and on their own right, but at that level. And when you talk to Alabama football players, even the coaches, they always talk about having their own type of a standard. They want to play up to their standards and not necessarily compare it to the opposition or whoever it is that they might be facing that week. And so the idea is to go out there and compete and to execute at a level that they expect, and they want to be at full capacity at all times. You saw a week ago in a division game an Alabama football team go out there and basically work on an element of their offense in the passing attack. They didn't use Mississippi State necessarily as a scrimmage because ultimately it counted in the win-loss column, but they are at the level where I think that they can kind of go out there and try to ply their trade in certain elements of the game. It could be special teams, it could be elements on the defensive side of the football, and still try to come away with a victory. They did it versus Mississippi State. I'll be surprised if we don't see more of that again tomorrow versus UTC. I think we'll see a lot of Jalen Hurst in the offensive backfield, but in the pocket. Less running and more passing from the quarterback for Alabama.
Matt, you hear from fans, not that they matter when it comes to game planning, but fans like these games because there's not a high stress level, but they're also nerve-wracking because you don't want to see anybody hurt anytime, but you certainly don't want to see anyone hurt in a game like this. What's the mindset of that coaching staff in terms of how long to let the starters stay in the game?
Well, I'll have to infer what their mindset is because it's not a very well-received question when you ask coaches, when do you anticipate perhaps getting some guys in there and developing depth, giving some reps to some other guys because they want to at least outwardly, publicly, project the idea that you're approaching this game just like any other. So we didn't even go into that necessarily, but I would be surprised if we didn't see some substitutions early and or guys rotating into their respective lineups early on in this football game, given the opportunities. And, of course, you got to look at it from UTC's perspective as well. They are looking to compete in the playoff and in the postseason as well. I'd be surprised if we don't see perhaps some substitutions on their end as well. Both teams want to come out. They want to compete early. And at the same time, they've got their eyes, I think, a little bit further down the line beyond just the 4 quarters of football here tomorrow.
Matt, I realize this game's being nationally televised, but you just said something very interesting. Both programs really, once the trend lines are developed, really want to get out of this thing, which brings us to a bigger question. I ask rhetorically, why is this game being played at this particular time of the year?
Yeah, it's difficult, I think, in some ways because when you look at a football team like Alabama, as dominant as they have been, even at the FBS level, the challenge to maybe get someone in here to play from perhaps an FBS level or even a higher caliber opponent, if you will. And at the same time, do you want to get into a home and away scenario? Probably not. You also don't want to have an opponent right before a rivalry game where, in some years, Auburn, obviously the opposite side of the Iron Bowl, would try to schedule a bye week prior to the Iron Bowl. So they don't want to have a competitive disadvantage in what is arguably, probably not arguably, and you would know better than almost anybody, Paul, the biggest game on their schedule. You look at UTC, and from their perspective as well, obviously there's a financial component and why they want to play this football game. But it's a difficult set of circumstances, to be sure, for both programs, knowing that they've got a lot to play for, a lot that projects forward. And as you mentioned, the worst-case scenario, perhaps, is not necessarily coming out of this game with a defeat if you're UTC, but perhaps leaving with a couple of key injuries when you're facing an opponent that's as physical and imposing from a speed standpoint as Alabama is.
Finally, Matt, last night Lamar Jackson and his team certainly were uprooted from a pretty strong position both in the college football playoff ranking and the Heisman. What did that game do to both Louisville? I think we know they knocked them out, but what did it do mainly to Lamar Jackson?
To me, it only probably strengthens its candidacy from a Heisman standpoint. And I know that typically when you're a quarterback, you're judged by wins and losses and prospects for championships. But I think this year when you look at some of the outsized statistical numbers that Lamar Jackson has been able to put together, plus you couple that with the performance that his offensive line put forth versus Houston, the idea that Jackson's been as effective as he's been for the largest part of this season, and he's been operating behind an offensive front that can struggle as mightily as it did last night versus Houston, I think that only embellishes on what Lamar Jackson has been able to do all season. That coupled with the fact that there really isn't anybody, I think, within striking distance of Jackson. You could maybe say Jalen Hurts, but the question is, has he had that Heisman moment? And the only really opportunity he would have left in the regular season is versus Auburn. You'd have to have a close football game. Would he have to have a couple of Heisman-type moments? I don't necessarily foresee that happening, and given what might likely come out of the SEC East for the championship game, I don't know that that would afford the quarterback here at Alabama an opportunity as well in that regard. So to me, it's Lamar Jackson's to lose still, and even in that loss versus Houston, I think if anybody's paying attention, they'd realize just how talented the quarterback at Louisville really is, given the component pieces around him.
Matt Stinchcomb live in Tuscaloosa, where he'll be part of the broadcast team tomorrow night on ESPN2 between Chattanooga and Alabama. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Put a little cherry on the top.
Hey, basketball fans, this is Cassidy Hubbarth on the latest NBA Lockdown podcast. Me, Om Young Masuk, and George Sedano talk Drake's crush, LeBron's rest, and Russ versus Harden. Who you going with?
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Tomorrow night in Nashville, Shea Patterson's show arrives to the Music City for its second act. Vanderbilt coming off of a loss to Mizzou, and our man Cole Kubelik on the scene in Music City. Cole, thanks for the time as always. You've covered a lot of SEC games. You've played in a lot of SEC games. Have you seen anything quite like what we saw from Shea Patterson last Saturday night?
Boy, Paul, not from a true freshman, especially to be redshirted, and then with 3 games left in the season, have that red shirt pulled, and then to be able to go out and have the kind of success that he did on the road in one of the most violent, temperamental stadiums in the country, not just the SEC. I was overly impressed with what happened. I'd say the first play of the game, I'm studying the film, and I see Myles Garrett on the left side of the defensive line. He slants inside. The left guard and left tackle don't get it switched. There's an outside edge blitzer that comes free. If you're John Chavis, A&M's defensive coordinator, you're thinking, we got to win. We got the freshman quarterback. We're going to get a free shot on him from the blind side right here. Shea Patterson somehow sees that blitz, eludes, and goes for 16 yards right up the gut. So it took one play for me going back and studying that game to say, wow, this kid has some legitimate playmaking ability, and when he ad-libs, he can be dangerous.
Talking to Cole Kubelik in Nashville, and Cole, I want to get your thoughts on this Vanderbilt program that's playing tomorrow night. Vandy has Ole Miss and then Tennessee, which may or may not be a big game for the Tennessee Vols. It's always a rivalry, but could be very significant next week. This program has ebbed and flowed all year. It's won a couple of games that maybe we didn't expect, like the Georgia game, let a few games get away. Where is this program right now?
You get the feeling, Paul, that they're very close. And we visited with Derek Mason today. It's always a pleasure. He gets up on the dry erase board, and he's drawing up decent defenses for us. He's talking about strategy and what he wants to do with his young men. And speaking of those young men, we got to visit with Adam Butler today. We got to visit with Ralph Webb today. Anytime Orrin Burks, the first time we were here, you talk to the players on this football team, and it's hard not to come away impressed. I like the direction of this program, and I understand that James Franklin had this place at a peak that it had never reached before, and it's going to be difficult to get back to that. They're 2 games away from a bowl. They obviously have 2 games left. They'll need 2 wins to get there. These players want it. Derek Mason wants it. Defensively, I think they're where they need to be. But offensively, I just don't know if the identity fits the personnel just yet. A lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets from Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator. They've made mistakes at quarterback in games that they've lost this season. They made mistakes at quarterback in almost every game a year ago, and it cost them dearly. This year they have a bit of a running game. The receivers have come around. The offensive line's been up and down. They'll be good one week like they were against Auburn for 3 quarters, and then last week against Missouri, they're giving up twists, games, pressure. They just don't look like an SEC caliber offensive line. Bottom line, they need depth. They need some more size. They need to become a little bit more physical if they're going to want to run the offense to go along with the defense that Derek Mason is bringing here to Nashville.
On the other side, I'll ask a similar question. It may seem odd to ask about where the Ole Miss program is. It seems pretty bright with Shea Patterson, but it's also coming off of a very disappointing year. We still don't know the final disposition of the NCAA case. We had Coach Freeze on earlier this week, and he alluded to that as something that he has to continue to answer for. Your thoughts on Ole Miss's future?
Well, I think it's going to be easy to look on the offensive side of the football tomorrow night, Paul, and be excited if you're an Ole Miss fan. We talked about Shea Patterson, a true freshman quarterback. Let's be fair. He's been getting reps through the course of the season. We had him in the Wofford game in week 2, and he said that was a Friday night decision that they sat down with Shea and his parents and made the decision of, am I going to pull the red shirt, be a backup, try to get some reps, and then if something happens to Chad Kelly, be the guy later on. They thought he might have been the best quarterback going into this season on the roster back then. But you still have to be excited about the future at that position. You're going to have a true freshman at right tackle. You're going to have a true freshman at left tackle tomorrow for Ole Miss. And you're going to have freshman receivers and sophomore receivers all over the place. A.J. Brown is an absolute stud at receiver. You go back and watch DK Metcalf against Florida State and Wofford. He hurts his foot on a touchdown catch in the Wofford game. He looks like he'll be an exceptional wide receiver for this Ole Miss team in the future. DeMarcus Lodge will be running around. The future is bright offensively. The defense needs to build some depth. The system is in place. The staff is in place. You mentioned the off-the-field issues. Those will play themselves out. But I think just what is in place here for Hugh Freeze in Oxford from a personnel standpoint, it's hard not to be excited about this group moving forward, putting points on the board, and giving themselves great opportunities to win games.
I want to bounce around the SEC, Cole, because there's not a lot to choose from, but there are a lot of question marks. And you have an Arkansas program heading to Starkville. Both programs really not sure where they are. Arkansas has had a couple of really big wins, some upsetting losses. Same for Mississippi State. We all know about Texas A&M, but we also know about what happened after that. So your thoughts on both of these programs, because they're trying to move up in the SEC West, and that's a tough neighborhood to move up in.
It absolutely is. And I think both of these teams being hurt by depth. Now, they both had guys leave early for the draft a season ago. Denver Kirkland decides to leave early for Arkansas. You got a couple players who are really all-time greats. Hunter Henry's the best tight end in school history. Brandon Allen, one of the best quarterbacks in school history, winningest quarterback in school history. Now his brother Austin's taken over. So a program like Arkansas right now, like Mississippi State right now, when they lose linebacker Beniquez Brown, and when they have Bear Wilson leave at wide receiver, two guys who didn't get drafted and probably should still be there starting football games, you don't just plug and go at schools like that. The depth has not been built up just yet, so it hits them a little bit harder than an Ohio State or a Clemson or an Alabama or a Michigan, and it takes longer to bounce back. But I still think under the direction of those two head coaches, the programs are absolutely heading in the right direction. You mentioned how filthy the SEC West is. Every team in the SEC West can get you any Saturday. I don't care who it is, where you are, what it is. So you have to think you're not going to get 9, 10, 11 wins every single season. It's just not going to happen. It's something that makes what Nick Saban's doing at Alabama so much more astronomical than we even probably give him credit for. But I love the direction of both of these programs. I think Nick Fitzgerald has a huge future at Mississippi State. He is a legitimate dual-threat quarterback, can break you down with his legs. And what I like about him most, Paul, has accuracy through the air, but he can be a physical runner between the tackles as well. His offensive line has not played great football this season. They dealt with a few injuries, and they just don't have a solid running game behind him to lean on to give them secondary and tertiary options offensively in the run game. So I think the future is bright at both programs. Arkansas's got to find a way to play better defense. They've had trouble getting to the quarterback. Second and third level have had issues with tackling this season. That's a game tomorrow night that I know they both want. You want to close your season strong. Arkansas a little bit more still to play for under Brett Bielema. So I would like the Hogs in that game tomorrow.
Cole, you mentioned Alabama, and we talked to Matt earlier from Tuscaloosa. And that is such a strange game to me. You've got a pretty good team in Chattanooga. I mean, everyone's familiar with them. I mean, they're a nice team. They actually have bigger aspirations. They're playing Alabama. They know they're not going to win that game, and I say that. They don't have to say it. Alabama knows it's going to win the game. Alabama has Auburn in the SEC in the playoff. How do you deal with a game like this when you don't want to get anybody hurt? You do have to put an effort out. You want your players to progress, but it seems like a mess.
Well, I tell you, Paul, if you want an idea where Alabama is right now, I go back and I study that game against Mississippi State last week, and the first snap I see 78 at right guard for Alabama, Corin Curvin. Now, that's the fourth right guard that Alabama has played this season. Then the fifth right guard comes in still in the first half of that game, and who should have been starting at right guard in that game, Lester Cotton, comes in the second half, so he's healthy. Maybe not 100%, but two other guys go in that game are inserted at right guard, the fourth and fifth right guards of the season, just to get reps. I watched the defensive looks that they're getting from Mississippi State. Those weren't necessarily pass looks. I get the feel that they were just going out last week working on the pass game, that they just wanted to get Calvin Ridley involved again, wanted to get O.J. Howard and Ardarius Stewart involved again. It was all but a scrimmage for Alabama last week against an SEC West opponent. So, yes, it will be difficult for them to get up and rise up and be excited about this football game. But the issue with Alabama is you only have so many snaps to go around, and there are so many guys waiting in line wanting to be the next great player in that program. I think even the second and third string players, Paul, are so hungry to get some of that attention, their appetite to get a little bit of that championship bite that some of the players in front of them have been getting. It won't be much of an issue for Nick Saban to have his kids line up and get an easy victory tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for us at 38,000 feet, but you played the game, Cole, and you were a good player, but when you just got down to Auburn a few years ago, you wanted to get in the game, didn't you?
No, and going back to the Shea Patterson deal that you asked me about, and so many people are up in arms about this, and I can only give this to myself and think about this from my situation that I was in. If Terry Bowden in 1996 would have come up to me and said, and we had a similar conversation early in the season when we lost a couple defensive tackles, and I remember Bill Oliver came over and said, if we lose another guy, I'm going to come after you, and I'm going to try to get you because I played only defensive tackle at Homewood High School, and they wanted me to be a center. If Terry Bowden comes to me, and you know what the last three games are on that schedule, and says, hey, we need you, we're going to burn your red shirt, you're not going to be able to have that extra year, but you're going to start against Georgia, Alabama, and a non-conference opponent, there is no discussion to be had. Sign me up right now. I want to be in the game. I want to play. Let's go. So absolutely, you have guys on this Alabama team, and they go good versus good. They go ones versus one in practice a lot. So they probably felt like they have been able to prove themselves, and they can hang with the best players in the country because they're practicing against them on a daily basis. Now they're going to get one of those rare opportunities to step on the field at Bryant-Denny Stadium and be able to go put that uniform on and play SEC-style football the way Nick Saban wants them to. So your opportunities are very limited in college football, Paul. And this season goes by fast. You know it just like I do. We're sitting here at the end of November. I got 2 weeks left, and I'm disappointed that the season's almost over. As a player, you don't realize until you're finished and you look back and you say, wow, that went quickly. And that's why I don't like kids being kicked out of games for targeting. It's a totally different discussion. But your opportunities to do what you arrived on campus to do, which is play a football game, are so limited that you have to take that opportunity and make the best of it. And I think those kids in Tuscaloosa, even though it's a non-conference game and none of us get excited about it, it's not a big deal, you'll see some guys go show out on that team tomorrow.
One other question, and you mentioned your days at Auburn. Auburn has a game tomorrow that we'll see Jeremy Johnson play quarterback. But bigger picture, we all know what Auburn has ahead, and certainly no one expects Auburn to win that game, but no one at Auburn wants to look bad in that game either. What's the state of this program right now with the one we all thought was ascending after a pretty surprising loss, Cole?
Yeah, beat up, limping a little bit, Paul. I'd have probably bet my baby if you had asked me after the Clemson game if Jeremy Johnson would get another start at quarterback for the Auburn Tigers. And I would have never thought I'd see that day. They're beat up right now. Sean White is an instrumental part of what that offense needs to truly bring balance to that offense. Cam Petway was an absolute battering ram. And it's not that there's not other good backs on that roster. It's just hard to find a back that you can give the football to, and he's going to immediately be able to turn it north and south, make guys miss, run over guys, and you have a pretty good feeling you're coming away with 4 or 5 yards, even if it's a negative play and as far as how it was handled up front and how it was blocked. So they're beat up. You listen to Malzahn in his press conference and Chandler Cox and Stanton Truitt. I mean, he's running down a laundry list of guys that will not play in that football game. And James Spady, the head coach at Alabama A&M, he's got a dual-threat quarterback and a nice little tailback that's gone for over 1,000 yards this year. They have to be licking their chops up in Huntsville, Alabama, as they get ready to take a bus ride down to Jordan-Hare Stadium thinking, we might have a chance against these guys. If they're putting a quarterback in that hasn't really played since game one, half the roster's beat up and banged up, problem will be that defensive line is still pretty healthy for Auburn, And Alabama A&M hadn't seen anything like Montravius Adams and Carl Lawson, the way that group have been playing football. I think the program's still in good shape. I think everyone should be happy with what Malzahn has done this season. Kevin Steele's done a great job with the defense. They just have to find consistent quarterback play and one that can stay healthy, Paul, and be in the lineup that they can count on for a full season.
Cole, always a pleasure. We're just proud to see you at these games every week. We had so many conversations about your ascending to ESPN, and, man, have you done well. Thanks so much, Cole. It's always great to be with you.
Hey, it's been a blast, Paul. I appreciate you.
You bet. Cole Keebler joining us from Nashville on a Friday afternoon.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You're not worth a flip.
Booger McFarland coming up shortly. John is up next. I think we were talking to John a minute ago. Go right ahead, John.
Hey, Paul, can you hear me, buddy?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Paul, my question is, Louisville's, as I said earlier, Louisville's out of the picture.
That is correct.
You hear me, Paul?
I hear you
Paul,
well, yeah.
In your opinion, who do you think, Paul, who do you think will challenge Alabama in the college football playoff here?
John, I would probably go a couple weeks ago. I may have gone with Clemson, maybe even Louisville. 4 or 5 weeks ago, I'd go with Ohio State right now. I think they're easily the second best team in the country. They also have the X factor of the second best coach in the country. So I think that really matters. Thank you very much for the call. Jim is in Austin, Texas, and you are next up. Hey, Jim. Good afternoon.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment about Kevin Sumlin. I think it's time for Kevin to leave the Aggies, and I think it's time to part ways. We've had this now for 3 years in a row where he's cratered, and we're lucky that we hadn't lost 5 games, honestly. The only reason we hadn't lost 5 games is because of the sheer talent we have on the field. The players are great. Unfortunately, there's a vortex of mediocrity that surrounds Kevin Sumlin, and eventually it sucks everything in around it, and it's happening again. So I don't know if anyone, people say maybe it's overreaction or whatever, but it's time for us to move on and get a new coach. And, it's 3 years in a row, I think, is enough.
Jim, thank you for the call. I mean, I would, 2 weeks ago I would have probably put up a vehement argument with you, but I've heard from some Aggie friends of mine yesterday, today, and, I mean, there's a lot of questions being asked out there, and I will say that I think Thursday night is a very important game for dictating the future, which is hard for me to believe that I'm even hearing, but that's reality. Booger McFarland joining us from studio. Booger, always good to catch up with you on a Friday afternoon. I want to start with last night. We were on College Football Live yesterday and weren't singing the Louisville songs, but apparently they were raking you over the coals in Louisville about your lack of love and respect for the Cards, and look what happened last night.
Paul, you know what? It was one of the more, more tough days yesterday, because I kept saying all along I thought Louisville was Lamar Jackson and a bunch of dudes. Now, obviously, they have good players with Fields and everyone else and Radcliffe. I realized that. But I thought overall they had one great player and not a great team. And everybody in Louisville from all the local radio stations, Paul, I mean, they were dragging my name through the mud yesterday. Bobby Petrino came on Mike and Mike and said they were disrespected by not being in the college football playoff at this point. And little did he know that his team probably paid attention to him. And guess what? They didn't show up last night, and Louisville played like the Louisville I thought they were, which was a team that was one great player. And Lamar Jackson is going to win the Heisman. But overall, they're just not a great team. So for everyone in Louisville, how you like us now?
Yeah, it's amazing, Booger, because that was their moment in time. I mean, they may not have made it to the college football playoff, but they were certainly within a position, and they blew it, and it's hard to get that back.
Well, no doubt, Paul, and it was a great opportunity, and they've had a couple of opportunities this year, Paul, on stages that were huge at Clemson in the fake Death Valley, where they had an opportunity to show the nation what type of team they were, and to a certain point they did, and it left everyone clamoring for more and more. And here was an opportunity on a Thursday night to show the committee not only did they belong, but how they belong, by how much they would win by. That's all we were talking about. How much would they win by? And little did we know that Tom Herman would throw his name back in the ring for being one of the most sought-after coaches in college football, because Houston was the most prepared team. They were the better team. And quite frankly, this game was over with at halftime, Paul.
It was. As far as Tom Herman, that's been the story all season long. It ebbed and it flowed. Where do you think he ends up?
You know, Paul, right now it's tough to say. I know everyone is going to say LSU. They're going to point to Texas if Charlie Strong is let go there. Obviously, Clay Helton at USC has kind of turned that program around. It wouldn't surprise me at this point, Paul, right now, that if Tom Herman sits at the University of Houston for another year, if he doesn't get invited to be a part of the LSU job mix. I think that job mix is probably the biggest job mix in the country right now, with Ed Ogeron, Jimbo Fisher being rumored, and everyone out there, Lane Kiffin, like all the normal candidates are being rumored. Tom Herman's name is in that. If he doesn't land a job like that, it wouldn't surprise me right now if he stays at Houston for another year.
Let's get to the games of the weekend, Boog. Certainly, I know you are. You've been in flying back and forth across the country. You have watched film. Guarantee you've broken this game down. So who you got? Missouri, Tennessee.
You know, Paul, this is Joshua Dobbs' last game in Neyland Stadium, Rocky Top. It's senior day. I got to think that Joshua Dobbs and Alvin Kamara are going to come out and put on a performance, put on a show, because guess what? They still have aspirations of going to Atlanta. They need LSU to beat Florida. But if you're Tennessee, you can only control your part and only do your part. So I got to think that Tennessee comes out and they open up a can, Paul, especially on senior day, especially with Joshua Dobbs. I think Tennessee wins, and I think they win big.
Arkansas and Mississippi State, it may not look like a great game. The winner gets a little bit of momentum going into the final game, but the loser here, Booger, it really is a sour taste left in their mouths. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, both teams, Paul, are coming off very, very bad losses, where Alabama crushed Mississippi State, and then obviously what LSU did to Arkansas. So I think whichever team can bounce back. I like the Hogs in a bounce-back game. Brett Bielema, to me, they have a little bit more talent for Arkansas than Mississippi State does, although Mississippi State has the X factor and a quarterback that can run and throw and move the football in Nick Fitzgerald. I'm leaning toward a little bit of an upset. Arkansas going on the road, going in there, ringing the cowbells. I like Arkansas. I like Austin Allen, a young quarterback that's been struggling. I like for him to bounce back. Dan, he knows that offense, that running game. I think Arkansas goes in and gets the win.
Ole Miss at Vanderbilt. Ole Miss stunned the world the other day with Shea Patterson's coming out party. Vandy, tough loss at Mizzou. What happens?
Vandy always shows up, Paul, or at least their defense does, and I think that defense will be there. I think it's going to be tough for Ole Miss to move the football. Ole Miss's offense, as far as being physical, showed a little bit more physicality last week, and Shea Patterson looks like the second coming of Johnny Manziel, but he's going up against a Vanderbilt defense that's, quite frankly, is better than the defense that he saw last week. I think Ole Miss wins the game. It's going to be another tough, physical football game for Vanderbilt. But I do think Shea Patterson, him being explosive as he is, I think he makes enough plays in the run game and in the pass game. I like Ole Miss to win this game on the back of the new Johnny Manziel, as we call him.
Biggest game of the day right here in Baton Rouge. You know the territory pretty well. Game that has been rescheduled from 6 weeks earlier. What do you think?
Paul, first of all, I think it's very ironic. Remember 6 weeks ago when the game was supposed to be played? Luke Del Rio was hurt. Florida had some defensive linemen that were hurt. And everyone out there said, Florida's dodging this game because their guys are hurt. Leonard Fournette was hurt. So, Paul, fast forward 6 weeks, and what do we have? Luke Del Rio is hurt. Florida has some defensive linemen that are hurt. Fournette is a little banged up. So really, did we change anything besides the venue, Paul? I mean, we could have played this game 6 weeks ago, and we'd have been in the same situation from a team and player personnel standpoint. However, when it's all said and done, Paul, I think this is going to be a defensive game. Florida ranks number 2 in the SEC in scoring defense. LSU is number 3, only behind by a small hair. I think this game being at 1 o'clock Eastern time is going to affect everything. I like a close, close game, but I do think LSU's offense is a little bit more explosive than Florida. It's going to be a close game, Paul. I say 17-13 Tigers in the real Death Valley, LSU over Florida.
Yeah, and you mentioned the time Spears was by here earlier, and, of course, Spears said he hated to get up early for these 12 o'clock games.
Exactly. Paul, to me, the time – well, here's what I mean by the time. We all know LSU wants to play night games. They want to be late where all the natives can get liquored up and get ready to go, and that stadium will be rocking with 102,000. It's still going to be rocking. But part of the negotiation process with Jeremy Foley and Joe Oliva on his way out was, okay, the game couldn't start past a certain time. So Florida knew exactly what they were doing, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to play LSU at night when I was supposed to play in Gainesville in the beginning. So the game starting at 1 o'clock will be a factor. LSU's crowd is notorious for being a crowd that doesn't get going until later. So Florida has the upper. Even though the game is in Baton Rouge, I think Florida catches a little bit of a break with the game being at noon local time.
Yeah, and I believe the game originally was a noon Eastern time start, so it's pretty much where it was other than the difference between Gainesville and Baton Rouge. Booger, we'll talk next week. Thanks so much for your time.
Paul, make sure you find some catfish down in Baton Rouge, Paul. I told everyone to bring you some catfish.
Still looking for it, but I know there's a place around right. I can see the place that you told me to go last time, and
yes,
I'll drop by there.
Go by and get some food, Paul. Please go get some.
Catfish, hush puppies, anything else?
Catfish, hush puppies, and coleslaw, and make sure you eat it all. Don't just look at it.
I'll send you a picture.
All right.
Good stuff. Booger McFarland joining us.
Thank you for listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast. The Paul Finebaum Show airs weekdays on the SEC Network, beginning at 3 Eastern.
Welcome to Belk, official retail department store of the SEC. With more than 300 department stores in the Southeast, we get your fashion. We know it's more than a game, it's a way of life, and part of the modern Southern lifestyle we deliver every day. At Belk, you'll find new looks from the best brands like Michael Kors, Fry, Free People, Under Armour, and more. All at great prices you'll love, the fashion you desire, the value you deserve. That's modern Southern style. Experience it today in store or at belk.com.